Afternoon everyone, and welcome to another transfer special of On the Whistle, where we're going to be talking about Granit Xhaka at Sunderland. Now there's a sentence I never thought I'd be saying in the summer of 2025, and I'm going to go out and guess that it's a sentence that not many of you thought you'd be hearing in the summer of 2025, but there we have it. So at the time of recording this, and I strongly suspect when you're listening or watching this video, Xhaka won't officially be announced as a Sunderland player yet. The deal isn't quite yet done at time of recording on Monday afternoon. We've obviously seen with what happened with the Sassuolo forward, Armand Loriente, that until everything is finalised, until all the pen is on paper, and until the scarf's been held aloft, the transfer isn't done. So obviously we proceed with that kind of caveat, if you like. But as we've done all summer, we've been taking a look at players when a deal is very advanced, what they might bring to the team, why Sunderland are signing them. And Xhaka is definitely in this category now. A fee has been agreed today, around 15 million euros up front, with a potential for around 5 million euros more to be realised in potential add-ons. So we're looking at a fee of around £17.5 million, with around 13 of that up front. That's quite a rough estimate, but that's kind of what we're talking about here. The player, as we know, agreed to join Sunderland last week. You know, the framework of a 3-year contract is in place, so that should progress pretty quickly. The hold-up was because, while Leverkusen made clear they weren't going to stand in Xhaka's way, they were very clear that given he had 3 years left on his contract and the scale of the challenge in replacing him, they wanted a far more significant fee than what Sunderland had initially offered. Now, after a lot of negotiation, they've kind of found that middle ground, and Xhaka now has clearance to travel to Sunderland for his medical, and all being well, it's something that should progress in the next couple of days. So let's get into it. Let's talk about why this is so significant for Sunderland, where Xhaka will fit into the team, what he'll bring, and what this kind of means moving forward. First thing this is a huge statement of intent from Sunderland to go and get a player of this calibre and to convince him to come and join what is likely to be a relegation battle in the Premier League. I think it shows the strength of the project, if you like, and how attractive the project is to players. The story that Sunderland have created over the last few years of this sleeping giant kind of rising again, and this journey to try and re-establish themselves in the Premier League level and to kind of live up to that history, if you like. We're seeing increasingly that the players want to be part of this story, and I think to sell it to a player of Xhaka's calibre who still has a lot to offer at the top level is a real exciting one for Sunderland, and I think is something that fans should be really excited by, not just because of this deal, but what it means moving forward and the other players that they might be able to convince to come on this journey. Now, it's obviously a real significant shift from Sunderland because they have always signed experienced players at every stage of this journey under Kirill Dreyfus and Christian Speakman, and now, of course, Florent Gisolfi. You know, when they were promoted to the Championship, they brought in some experienced players. That League One team, for sure, who got promoted, had some real experienced players at the level, at the core of the team. But of course, what Sunderland never did was pay fees for them. And to pay a fee of this level, as I say, around £17.5 million, for a player where realistically at the age of 32, there's little to no future resale value, marks a real shift in Sunderland's business policy. It's not entirely unexpected. Christian Speakman made clear at the end of the season, after Sunderland being promoted, that Sunderland understood that because of the scale of the challenge of jumping up to Premier League level and because of the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, they were going to have to do some things a little bit differently. And of course, broadly, their transfer policy this summer has been very similar. The big fees have gone on young players with potential to grow in resale value. Reynaldo, of course, coming in on a free. So this is still very much as an exception rather than an entirely new strategy, if you like. But I think it speaks to, you know, the fact that, as I've said on a few times on these videos, Sunderland know that they're going up one division in paper, but 4 or 5 divisions in reality in terms of the step up in level. And so I think that it's clearly a transfer that carries some risk from those financial aspects, but I think is a recognition of the quality that Xhaka has and what he can potentially bring to the team. You know, and the obvious bet is that, you know, if Sunderland are able to stay up, then the financial benefits of that over future years and what it can mean for the club make a fee like this pretty small fare. But undoubtedly, you know, it's a hugely ambitious deal, and not one without risk because of the finances involved. Now, why is Sunderland wanting to sign Granit Xhaka? Obviously, there is what he'll bring in terms of the experience that he has at elite level in Europe. It's obvious what he'll bring in terms of his organisation, his communication skills, the way he's going to be able to help set the standards every day and drive the team forward. But I think what's really important to know about this deal is the reason probably why Sunderland are willing to spend this level of money on a 32-year-old player is this isn't a player on the downward spiral who's kind of coming in to almost be a cheerleader and get a few minutes, if you like. This is still an elite level European midfielder whose stats from the last 2 seasons with Bayer Leverkusen are exceptional. There's no other way to describe it. Still a very durable player, played 33 times in the Bundesliga last season. Of course, it's a 34-game season in the Bundesliga. So not had any injury issues, not really had any physical fitness issues. Also made 10 appearances in the Champions League last season as well. So we're talking about someone who is still playing week in, week out at the highest level. And if we have a little look into his statistics, we can see that he is still an elite level player, and especially when it comes to passing and creativity. His numbers rank up there with anybody in Europe when it comes to chance creation and pass completion. I'm going to dig into that a little bit in a second after I've had a sip of coffee. So, as we have done all summer, taking a look at stats website FBref to get a comparison, just to see what Xhaka does well compared to other players in his position. So if we look at other centre midfielders last season across the top 5 divisions in Europe and also all the European competitions, Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, his passing statistics are remarkable. There's no other way to describe it. Top 3% for passes completed, top 1% for passes into the final third, top 3% for progressive passes, top 20% for key passes and expected assists, top 5% for passes that ultimately lead to a goal, top 4% for passes that lead to a shot, top 7% for carries, so dribbling forward with the ball into dangerous areas. Quite simply one of the best passing midfielders in Europe. Absolutely no other way to describe him. Not a flash in the pan either. His numbers the season before were very similar, if not even slightly better in some areas, when of course Leverkusen had that iconic season where they won the league and the cup and almost went the full season unbeaten before losing to Atalanta in the Europa League final. And if we drill a little bit closer, looking at Y-Scout as well for the statistics last season, 5th for assists across the entire Bundesliga, 3rd for passes completed, and I would add as an addition to that that numbers 1 and 2 were both Bayern Munich players. So outside of Bayern Munich, obviously the best team in the league last season, nobody completed more passes than Xhaka, and he was also 3rd for progressive passes. So not just passes for the sake of it, passes actually in dangerous areas, passes that actually lead into things happening. So I think that gives you a flavour of what Xhaka brings at this point in his career. Just quality really in possession. Really good at setting the tempo of a game, knowing and understanding when to slow the game down, when to quicken things up, when to take a risk, when not to take a risk. I think a really kind of elite level player who's going to add something completely different to Sunderland's midfield. Now, trying to throw it forward and look at where he'll fit into Sunderland's shape and system and style, it's probably the hardest of all the transfers we've discussed this summer, because obviously the differences between the Bayer Leverkusen team he's played in for the last 2 years and Sunderland moving forward this season is absolutely vast. For one, Bayer Leverkusen favoured a back 3 under Xabi Alonso, and 2, they absolutely dominated possession in most games, especially in the season, of course, where they won the title. We know it's not really going to look like that for Sunderland next year. A, they're going to play with a back 4, and B, a lot of the game they'll be playing on the break. So it's going to be really a different style, a different system. There's going to be no sort of easy comparison there. Xhaka, for the most part, Leverkusen played a kind of 3-4-2-1 system. Xhaka played as one of the 2 holding midfielders in that system. So if you imagine it, you've got your wing backs, you've got 2 holding midfielders, 2 attacking midfielders and a striker. Xhaka very much is one of those 2 most deep lying midfielders, if you like. But I have to say that watching his clips and watching a lot of the things that he's been involved in, clearly in that Leverkusen side, a huge amount of freedom and license to break forward. Constantly sort of picking up the ball on the edge of the area, trying to unpick a low block, trying to create chances, trying to make something happen. Definitely not a traditional holding midfielder, if you like. That wasn't his role for Leverkusen. As I say, very much about setting the tempo and the rhythm of the game and also trying to open up the opposition defence. I think it's most likely he'll play as a 6 for Sunderland. I think there'll be a demand for him to organise, to communicate with the players in front of him. I think to take the ball off the back 4 in pressurised situations, because he's got the quality to do that. And I think there'll be a big onus on him to play those forward passes to trigger Sunderland's counter-attack. So I think we'll see him playing a lot of early passes out into the wings. I think we'll see him playing a lot of early passes over the top for whoever's playing up front. So I think it will be a different role. But I think that, I think the obvious thing that Sunderland want to get from Xhaka and that he's going to bring is a quality and a composure on the ball that you don't often see from teams, I think, who have just won promotion. So I think it's a really exciting prospect. Defensively, his numbers are nowhere near as strong as his passing numbers for Leverkusen. I wouldn't get too caught up on that because there's an obvious reason for that. Potentially is that obviously Leverkusen dominating the possessions. You don't expect their midfielders to get through as much defensive work as a team, for example, at the bottom of the table would do. So I'm not getting too caught up in that. I don't think it suggests any defensive issues. I just think it's not the strongest part of his game, and certainly not on the Leverkusen side that dominates the ball. Actually, one thing that I noticed on Weisgart looking at the Bundesliga last season was he compared pretty favourably to a lot of midfielders, sort of near enough the top 20 for recoveries and counter-pressing recoveries. So I think that can show you that he understands when to press. He's good at winning the ball back. He can sort of come out on top in duels. And I think that's obviously going to be an important part of Sunderland's game this season, because while at times they'll sit off in the low block, they'll try and pick the right moments to jump and press really aggressively, and Xhaka's going to be part of that. So I think this is a really exciting transfer. I can't help but be excited by it. And I think as well, even taking away the sort of tactical, statistical side of things, I just think it's potentially, if this goes through, quite a big moment for the club, because I think it's the biggest signal yet, and that Sunderland are back in the big time. And I think this is what promotion is all about. I'm thinking especially about like the younger generation of Sunderland fans, many of whom may not actually have ever seen Sunderland in the Premier League, or if they have, only remember sort of them briefly and being relegated. I think to be signing a player of this calibre and of this stature is a bit of a watershed moment for the club. And I think it's just going to take the feel-good factor to the next level. And that's why I'm kind of really excited about it. And I think especially for supporters, after such a long journey kind of out of League One and then through the Championship as well, I think it's just a moment to enjoy and a moment to savour. And yeah, I think some of the things we've talked about in terms of the finances and things, I think it's totally acceptable for supporters to let the club hierarchy worry about that. I don't see them doing this kind of deal a lot, to be honest, in terms of that player who's past 30, a big fee with no resale value. I think it's a really risky thing to do if you do it regularly, and I don't think Sunderland will do that. I think this is a little bit of a one-off, might be a little bit extreme, but I think it's an exception. I think that's probably what I expect it to look like at the end of the window. Yeah, my expectation is that I think, Xhaka will come in to sort of be the leader of this team, if you like, the key organiser, with maybe a combination of Diarra, Siddiqui, Lefebvre in front of him. Dan Neil will have to compete for this position or compete to play a little bit further forward. So clearly this has big repercussions for that sort of midfield blend, especially when you throw Chris Rigg, when he's fit again, into that position. It's an area of the pitch where Sunderland are looking really, really well stocked. So I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to kind of wrap it up a little bit. But yeah, I think the important thing that I kind of, that doing my research, watching Xhaka, looking into his statistics, was I think no indications whatsoever of this being a player kind of whose career is on the way down at all. As I say, especially in some areas games, he is still an elite level European operator. So I think it's a huge coup for Sunderland. I think this transfer is a really, really big deal. No certainties in football, if and when it goes through, how he'll succeed, how he'll bed into the team, how he'll adjust again at Premier League level. You just never know. Obviously, so many uncertainties, and every transfer is a risk. But this is definitely feels like a big moment in Sunderland's summer and its recent history. So let's hope that proves to be the case. As ever, stacks of stuff on the Sunderland Echo website, analysis, news, all that kind of stuff. Loads more videos coming up in the coming days. I'll be at Hull on Tuesday night. Usual analysis video on the website from that. So just yeah, exciting times. Thanks for watching again, and keep your eyes peeled because there's loads of stuff coming.